This is White Plains Week, the weekly roundup of White Plains, Westchester, and world news. With John Bailey, editor and publisher of the daily internet newspaper White Plains Citizen Net Reporter, WPCNR.com. Jim Benneroff, editor and publisher of SuburbanStreet.com and WhitePlains.com. And me, Peter Katz, formerly with NBC, ABC News, and stations from Boston to Los Angeles. White Plains Week, what's happening? Who are the newsmakers? What's in store for the future? The views and opinions expressed on this program are solely those of the participants. White Plains Week is presented on Optimum Cable Channel 76, Verizon Fios Channel 45, and on the internet at whiteplainsweek.com, youtube.com, and wpcommunitymedia.org. Now, White Plains Week.
Good evening. This is John Bailey. It's White Plains Week. And welcome again to Mr. and Miss and Ms. White Plains and Westchester and the world. Jim Benneroff is on assignment this week, so we have the anchor for all seasons, Peter Katz, with headlines.
Indeed, and here are the headlines for the program we're recording on Friday, December 14, 2018. Westchester County Executive George Latimer signs the 2019 county budget within hours after the Board of Legislators give their approval. It's $1.9 billion, and taxes are going up by 2%. The county executive forms a climate action task force, the idea to cut down on carbon emissions throughout the county. This task force is supposed to come up with ideas which they will then consider. Electric customers, both residents and small businesses, have until the end of the year, December 31st, to call Westchester Power to lock into green energy rates for 2 years. Now, if you're already a customer of Westchester Power, you don't have to do anything to continue with your lower rates. The White Plains Council of Neighborhood Associations holds a meeting, and they recognize that Facebook groups and community websites have become a new major source for local news. All of this with the shrinking of newspapers in the county and also local radio. Remember local radio, John?
Yes, you used to be on it.
Yeah, that's right. I was indeed. And right now there's only WVOX, which is anything like a community radio station. Yes. Anyone you know on WVOX? Oh,
yes,
you.
Tuesdays, about 10 minutes to 8.
Okay. White Plains Council of Neighborhood Associations brought all this up at a meeting they had over at Education House this past week. A man is stabbed in White Plains at the corner of Post and Mamaroneck. This is during a fight involving two people. The man who was stabbed is in stable condition, although serious, and the other man, the suspect, has been arrested. Measles cases continue to spread ominously across the river in Orange County. Let's keep them across the river and not here. And at the same time, fentanyl has been found to have resulted in the death of 64,000 young Americans. The fire that destroyed the Wildcliff house in New Rochelle, well, it's now been blamed on arsonists, 13 years of age. Suspects have been taken into custody and then released to the custody of their parents. Michael Cohn says that Trump did indeed know that what was going on was against the law. More on that coming up. 19 arrested by federal authorities for sex trafficking of young girls, including some at Cedar Knolls Center here in Westchester. A new drug crisis center is proposed to be set up somewhere in the White Plains area by county officials. This would be handled as part of George Latimer's drug crisis team. John?
Thank you, Peter. And we go to the White Plains Week video newsreel. And it's beginning to look a lot like Christmas. We had snow flurries yesterday. You can see one of them right on the camera there.
Yeah, nothing really stuck, though,
No.
on dusting here and there on grassy surfaces, but beyond that, roads were absolutely fine.
But I must say the new weatherman on News 12 is really accurate. His forecasts have been right on the money for the last couple of weeks. I've been watching that, so kudos to him. So, be that now, next up, it was signing of the Westchester County budget, and Peter, you have the details.
Indeed.
And actualities.
The detail is what people really don't want to hear. The big detail is your taxes are going up, folks. For the first time in 8 years, county taxes will be rising, because within hours of the County Board of Legislators approving the Latimer administration's new budget on Monday, County Executive George Latimer held a bill signing in his media room with various county officials and legislators on hand.
We deal with a proximate reality. We have to stay within a tax cap. We have an electorate that would prefer that we never raise taxes, if not reduce taxes at every opportunity, because they feel the heavy burden of property taxes. And yet we have people who consume services that are essential, that they have to have a public bus to take them to their work, that they have to have social services deliver certain services to them because they're in need. And sometimes it's very difficult to correlate the need of the spending of the money if you yourself do not have that need. And I've often said, if you are not in jail, incarcerated, or on probation, having been incarcerated, you don't understand what the jail and what the probation departments are about in this county government. And if you don't get on a Beeline bus, you don't understand necessarily what the transportation is in this county. It's not your problem, but it is our responsibility to provide those services. And that's what this budget has to do, whether or not the individual consumes the service or not. And then there are services that we consume that are somewhat invisible. When the local government picks up your garbage and recyclables, you don't see the role of the county government in the process of its final disposal, but the county government has a significant role from the transfer station to either Charles Point or a MRF in terms of the removal of those things that are in our waste stream, and the role that the county government plays in the sewage treatment. I'm sure it's after lunch. Everybody doesn't mind talking about sewage. We're still well before dinner. But the bottom line is public health is ensured by proper disposal of sewage, and that's a problem of that's responsibility of county government as well. So when we sit down and we work with numbers, behind tax rates are human beings and are services that are essential in the society. And that's the correlation I think that people have to make. When you write your headlines in print, when you have your lead in from the anchor desk to the reporter that's going to cover this story, remember that it's not just the tax rate, it's not just the total cost of government, it is the services of those that this government provides. And if you fail to give proper weight to the services, then it looks as if money is being spent irrelevantly, when in fact it treats sewerage, it incarcerates those who have to be incarcerated, and a host of other things. This is Act number 216 of 2018, and it includes all of the different component pieces of the budget for the year 2019. This has been passed by a vote of 13-4 by the Board of Legislators, and on this day, the 10th day of December, 2018, I'm pleased to sign it, thereby making it in effect. And I know we have crummy pens. I promise better pens next year. Catherine Borgia.
You get the pen. You get the pen.
Thank you. We have a budget on time and balanced.
So there's a budget.
Yes,
County budget.
there is.
Now the county government can go on. Still to be resolved, such issues as playland, what to do with the county airport,
Absolutely.
what to do with the county center.
Which they've had 11 months to figure out.
Yeah.
And we don't know whether they met with Nick Price of Standard Amusements. We don't know what the attendance in Playland was. We have very little information on how well positioned Playland is for takeover.
Well, in fact, we had a chat with Peter Tartaglia, the Parks Commissioner,
What did Peter say?
earlier this week, and what he said was practically nothing.
No kidding. That's exactly what I got when I asked the same questions.
Other than confirming that the county will continue to operate Playland, at least for the next year or so. In fact, they had been setting up to do their Playland Job Fair, the first Playland Job Fair, seeking to line
the job
up
fair
talent
will
to work.
never go away. Now, The other question I had about the budget is what they did with the $35 million sales tax dollars surplus. Did they put it into the fund balance? Are they putting into the other popular general
bonanza
fund?
of money coming in from sales tax receipts?
Yes.
We don't know.
And as for another thing about Rye, if Rye drops, the city of Rye drops its lawsuit,
This is Playland you're
yes,
talking
right.
about.
That might help the Standard or whoever they try to get to take it over, because no company wants to be at the mercy of a town for their changes. Now, the other thing about the budget was the tremendous settlement they made with the CSEA. You really wonder, the CSEA, I want you to know, did not go hungry with 7 years of no salary increases. They got their regular step and longevity increases. So this is part of the Taylor law restriction. So let's face it, why would we give them up to 3%? There hasn't been 3% inflation in some time. But just a question. Now, Peter, we had a very interesting thing happening this week. We are running up on the deadline for the electric power decision, Westchester Power. Everybody should have gotten this letter by now. If we can have that, that's it. And it lists the new rates. Did you use electricity for your home and business? Of course you. Have you gotten this letter? One thing White Plains residents and small businesses can do is call Westchester Power, Sustainable Westchester, and join the 24 cities and towns, including White Plains, in opting for the new lower clean green energy kilowatt hour rate, 7.96 cents a kilowatt hour, lower than the last 2 years for the next 24 months, guaranteed. And this year, small commercial businesses can enjoy this rate along with residential. So you should give them a call to opt into the program. And if you are already in the program, you just have to stay put. You don't have to do a thing. This is very important for the small businesses. And then we had a CNA meeting Tuesday night, and they introduced some of the Facebook groups. This is one of them, White Plains Citizens Appeared. The next one, please, that's the Highlands Neighbor Association, and the last is the Moms of White Plains group. Most of these people comment on them, but you have to be a member of them.
Now, these have memberships ranging from about 900 to about 2,500.
Yes.
And what they do is they exchange news. Some people are relying on these as news sources. Of course, they're not done by professional journalists working in professional newsrooms who have professional reporters out on the streets beating the bushes to find out what's going on in the city and so forth. But what has happened is part really of the trend nationwide that we have seen with the rise of the internet, the rise of various cable news sources, and the demise of metropolitan area newspapers, where you don't have the local newspaper coverage you once did have. Now, White Plains still has a weekly paper going for it. The Examiner, we can get that in newspaper boxes, the distribution boxes on the streets. We also have the White Plains Citizen Net Reporter as a daily online version of a newspaper to go after. There is some local news coverage on News 12 and Fios 1, Fios News 1, which is carried on Verizon's cable system.
But just to comb the surface because it's such a big area.
Right. You don't have the White Plains coverage that you used to have. There used to be, in the heyday of the Gannett paper, one or two reporters assigned pretty much full-time to cover the city of White Plains. And in fact, sometimes you even had a third reporter assigned to cover just the school system.
Yes, and
that all has changed now. Rich Liebson, over at the paper, who used to be seen in City Hall practically every minute of every day, now is assigned to cover central Westchester, which is a pretty large area. So you just don't have the kind of in-depth local reporting that you used to. So there is a shift to the local thing. So what they did over at CNA was to discuss what is available locally. And really, it's people starting to create and exchange their own news via these
opinions. It's mostly opinions.
Via these Facebook sites.
Yeah.
Now, for example, on one of the sites, I happened to notice this week there was a house fire in town, and there were actually pictures of the fire while it was in progress. It wasn't a very big fire,
yes,
but nonetheless, it was knocked down fairly quickly.
Yes.
What you're seeing on the screen now
department.
is a different fire. This has nothing to do with White Plains. This was the fire over at the Wildcliff house, which is in New Rochelle. It's a famous old historic mansion, or it was until it burned, and was completely
built in the
destroyed.
1860s.
And now the officials in New Rochelle tell us that they have traced the origin of the fire, allegedly, to some 13-year-olds.
Which is really disturbing.
Arson by 13-year-olds.
I mean, but
Alleged
that was
arson
a
by
huge
13-year-olds.
fire.
Yeah.
And we haven't gotten any information as what they used to set it.
So anyway, getting back to this White Plains house fire, part of what was going on in the websites talking about it was that people were complaining about Fire Truck 34 being out of service.
But they but they didn't need it.
As it turns out, it was a small fire,
yes.
and even an additional minute or two in response time to get to the scene, caused by bringing in a truck from another firehouse.
The White Plains Fire Department does a great job, and whether they ever, I don't know whether it's a matter of personnel manning the truck or it's the truck itself. It's been missing for a long time.
And of course, no one said too much about the White Plains cable system. Now, one thing we reported about the death of Al Del Vecchio, the 18-year mayor of White Plains. One of the great accomplishments of his administration was establishing this whole cable TV system in White Plains.
Which you're watching now.
For public access, for government access, for educational access. And it was under the Del Vecchio administration that this first started really at the public library. And then by Al's efforts, it was moved from the public library to the professional TV studios where we are producing this show today.
The subterranean underground studios that give you what you don't get anywhere else.
This was really a pioneering effort in local news coverage to do things like permit the production of programs such as White Plains Week. And now how many years?
And you and Mark Politzer did a program years ago.
Right. We did indeed, yes. The Council of Neighborhood Associations had a weekly news program to keep people informed. And the city would televise the Common Council meetings, which was really a pioneering thing to do.
It certainly was. This station pioneered public television in Westchester County.
But the face of news is changing, both locally and nationally, and people are adapting to
our
it.
faces are changing too.
Yeah, and in fact, John, nationally, there'd been never anything like it until this week in news coverage of the White House. And the President of the United States and congressional leaders were covered at the White House having a fight on camera. Well, a verbal fight anyway. The news cameras were there to capture the whole thing. Incoming Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi and Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer went to see President Trump to try to convince him to accept a bipartisan border security bill, which they felt could be through Congress and on his desk very quickly. Well, Trump refused, and he renewed his ongoing threat to shut down the government unless they include in this bill the $15 or so billion he wants in U.S. taxpayer money to spend on the wall that Mexico was going to pay for across the border between the U.S. and Mexico, which he convinced his gullible supporters Mexico would pay for.
I think the American people recognize that we must keep government open, that a shutdown is not worth anything, and that you should not have a Trump shutdown. You have the White House, the Trump shutdown. You have the White House. You have the Senate. You have the House of Representatives. You have the votes. You should pass it right now.
No, we don't have the votes, Nancy, because in the Senate we need 60 votes.
No, but in the House.
And we don't
you
have.
could bring it up right now
Yeah, but
today.
I can't, excuse me, but I can't get it passed in the House if it's not going to pass in the Senate. I don't want to waste time.
Well, the fact is, you can get it started that way.
We have a lot of disagreements here. The Washington Post today gave you a whole lot of Pinocchios because they say you constantly misstate how much the wall is built, how much of the wall is built, and how much is there. But that's not the point here. We have a disagreement about the wall,
Washington
whether
Post.
it's effective or whatever. Not on border security, but on the wall. We do not want to shut down the government. You have called 20 times to shut down the government. You say, I want to shut down the government. We don't. We want to come to an agreement. If we can't come to an agreement, we have solutions that will pass the House and Senate right now and will not shut down the government, and that's what we're urging you to do. Not threaten to shut down the government,
you don't
because
want to
let me
shut
just
down the
finish,
government,
because
Chuck.
you can't get
The
your way.
last time you shut it down, you got
let
killed.
me say something, Mr. President. You just say my way or we'll shut down the government. We have a proposal that Democrats and Republicans will support to do a CR that will not shut down the government. We urge you to take
And
it.
if it's not good border security, I
It
won't
is
take
very
it.
good border
And if it's
security.
not good border
That's actually what
security,
border
I won't
security
take it.
asked
It's
for.
what the
Because when you look at these numbers of the effectiveness of our border security, and when you look at the job that we're doing
you
with our
just said it is
military,
effective.
can I tell you something?
Yeah, you just said it's
without a
effective.
wall, these are only areas where you have the walls.
We wanna do
where
this-
you have walls, Chuck, it's effective.
We-
Where you don't have
Wait a
walls,
second.
it
Let's
is not
call a halt
effective.
to this.
Yeah.
Let's call a halt to this. We've come in here as the first branch of government, Article 1, the legislative branch. We're coming in good faith to negotiate with you about how we can keep the government open.
We're going to keep it open if we have border security. If we don't have border security, Chuck,
I'm with you.
we're not going to keep it
I'm
open.
with you. We are going to have border security.
And it's the same board, you're
Effective
bragging
border
about what has been done.
By us.
We want to do the same thing we did last year, this year. That's our proposal. If it's good then, it's good now, and it won't shut down the government.
Chuck, we can build a
But that's
much
it.
bigger
Let's-
section
let's
with
debate-
more money.
let's
We have
debate in
taken
private.
what the American people deserve from us at this uncertain time in their lives. where they
One
have
thing I think we
apprehension.
can agree on is we shouldn't shut down the government over a dispute. And you want to shut it down, you keep talking about
The
it.
last time, Chuck, you shut it down.
No.
And then you opened
20
it up very
times.
quickly. And
20
I don't
times.
want to do what you did.
20
But,
times you
Chuck,
have called for, I will shut down the government if I don't get my wall. None of us have said.
You want to know something?
You've said it.
Okay, you want to put that on
You
my...
said it.
I'll take it.
Okay, good.
You know what I'll say? Yes. If we don't get what we want, one way or the other, whether it's through you, through a military, through anything you want to call, I will shut down the government.
Okay, fair
Absolutely.
enough.
And
We
I am
disagree.
proud, and I'll
We
tell you what,
disagree.
I am proud to shut down the government for border security, Chuck, because the people of this country don't want criminals and people that have lots of problems and drugs pouring into our country. So I will take the mantle. I will be the one to shut it down. I'm not going to blame you for it. The last time you shut it down, it didn't work. I will take the mantle of shutting down.
That is a
And I'm going to
luxury.
shut it down for border
But we
security.
believe you shouldn't shut
Okay.
it down.
But
Thank you very much, everybody.
Well,
About that.
you don't see that very often, do you?
No, you don't.
Now,
I think
of
Vince McMahon should be in touch with them.
Of course, what Trump completely forgets is that if you shut down the government, you're not going to be able to have money to pay the people who patrol the border. So you're
Right.
not. So
What
if
do they
you
do, go on
So
leave?
if you're shutting down the government because of you want border security, you're not going to have the border security you want by shutting down the government.
But it's a very shrewd political move. He says, I will shut it down because the Democrats don't want the wall. And that works to his political advantage.
No one wants the wall.
Nobody wants the wall, least of all the insurgents.
Or at least the smart people don't want the wall, especially people who know something about border security. They say it's nonsense. Go ahead,
One more
Jim.
item. While the airport and playland are stalled with no status confirmed, the county executive announced formation of a Westchester County Climate Task Force yesterday at the Confronting Climate Change, What to Expect in Our Region conference. He named Sustainability and Energy Conservation Director Peter McCart to steer the task force, and Janet Harcum, Beth Sauerhaft, and Angeli Soufdoff will be creating short-term action moves the county will take while working on an updated long-term action plan on climate change. That will be interesting.
Okay, something
What can you do?
interesting. Something interesting I noticed this morning. The White Plains Hospital is making some degree of progress in the construction of a new medical office building at Maple and Longview. In fact, they've started to tear down an apartment building, which has been on the site.
Well, that's less affordable housing, I guess, right?
But speaking of tearing things down, this morning, Michael Cohen, remember that name, Michael Cohen? Exclusive interview with ABC News, George Stephanopoulos. What he said, absolutely, he said Donald Trump is lying, that he knew what was going on. He ordered what resulted in Michael Cohen pleading guilty to felonies, and he was in the room when this all was happening. So Trump knew. Cohen, now you know, has been sentenced to 3 years in prison in cases brought by Special Counsel Robert Mueller and U.S. attorneys for the Eastern District of New York. Saudi Prince Mohammed bin Salman did direct and did monitor the murder of Khashoggi, the Washington Post columnist. That is according to a CIA briefing of Congress. Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law, has been advising the Saudi prince on how to handle the world outrage about the murder of Khashoggi.
I can't think of a better source to advise him. You know?
The Senate passed a bipartisan resolution condemning bin Salman and calling for an end to U.S. support for the Saudi war in Yemen. 50,000 children are starving to death as a result of the U.S. support of the Saudis. House Speaker Paul Ryan has refused to allow the House to pass a similar resolution, and we emphasize that was a bipartisan, Republicans and Democrats joining together against what this country is doing in supporting the Saudis. George Conway, the wife of Kellyanne Conway, Trump's advisor, has split with his wife. In a 39-minute interview with Chris Cuomo on CNN, Kellyanne continued lying about Trump not knowing anything about the hush money payments. And now George Conway, Kellyanne's husband, says, nonsense. Of course Trump knew. David Pecker of the National Enquirer and his company, AMI, are cooperating with the Mueller investigation. Trump used the National Enquirer in what's called a catch and kill, paying a woman $150,000 for her story about an affair with Trump and then covering it up before the election. Who wants to be chief of staff for Donald Trump in the White House? John, there's an opening. You have your resume ready?
Yes.
General Kelly was supposed to be out weeks ago. Well, Trump wants him to stay beyond the new year, at least into the new year, until they get someone lined up as chief of staff.
Okay, and this Monday, pick up free passes to the Jewish Museum in New York City at the library. And also this coming Wednesday, Winterfest begins. John Bailey, Peter Katz, for Jim Beneroff, good night for White Plains Week.
This has been White Plains Week, news and commentary about White Plains, Westchester, and the world. The views and opinions expressed on this program were solely those of the participants. White Plains Week, produced by White Plains Citizen Net Reporter, and presented on Optimum Cable Channel 76 and Verizon Fios Channel 45. You may view White Plains Week anytime on the internet at whiteplainsweek.com, youtube.com, and wpcommunitymedia.org. For White Plains Week, this is Peter Katz speaking.